Oh, I guess I should adjust my camera. Ah, hell. Good morning. Welcome to B Cube Sunday morning. I am Bob Brown, and since it is the second Sunday of the month, we have turned over the Master of Ceremonies position to Tom Whitmore, who has brought us some wonderful guests here that I'll let him introduce in a moment. You'll know that they're wonderful because you can see all the books on the shelves. Okay. The topic today is one near and dear to my heart, is activism. And if any of you happen to have a chance to catch Rachel Maddow's appearance on Stephen Colbert the other night, she talked heavily about activism and the importance of it. And I can tell you this, America is on the roll right now on activism. And I think that if they don't manage to destroy the electoral process, we're going to kick some serious butt here on the elections coming up. And so, Tom, that's about as exciting as I want to get right now.
All right. Well, today I have two old friends, Debbie Notkin and Kathy Gill. Deb I have known since the 70s, and we have done all sorts of interesting activist things together in all sorts of different places. And Kathy is more a friend of my partner Karen's. And quick plug, Karen has just self-published her first collection of short stories, which are about near future political dystopia. And it's available now in general. I can tell you more later if you want. But today, Mother's Day, we're going to talk about being the type of person who goes out and does something rather than just sitting around and not and bemoaning the fate. Kathy, would you say a little bit about your history of activism, and Deb, then you?
Okay, so thanks for having me here. My activism in terms of like classic activism started with the Women's March in 2017. And that kicked off my move to politics, because up until that point, the work that I had done had been policy. So I put a little box and I was dealing with policy. I wasn't dealing with elected politics, which isn't really true, because I had tried to help get somebody elected governor right after I moved to Washington. And I worked on a series of initiatives when I first moved to Washington that had to do with the Growth Management Act. So I've been here for 30 years. I write, and one of the things that's always been easier for me in an activist sense is writing op-eds and writing analysis. So I've moved from that to door knocking, to going to protests, to carrying signs, and I'm running for local office this fall.
Congratulations and good luck.
Thank you.
Yes. Deb.
Yeah, I don't, in a sense, I don't even know how to think about how it started. I guess the real honest truth is that activism started for me at the Democratic Convention in Chicago in 1968, which I was not at. In 1968, I was 17. I was at home with a bunch of younger kids, my younger brother, and some visiting friends or family kids that I was babysitting. And the stuff came on the TV about the protesters being attacked by the police in Chicago. And it just changed my whole worldview, because it began to erase the police are your friend that I'd been brought up with. And that later that year, I went to college. I got involved in all kinds. To be in college from 1968 to 1972 made it very, very, very easy to be an activist. And in some senses, I never left. And in other senses, I spent a bunch of my life doing things like body image activism, with the photographer Laurie Toby Edison, whose work some of you may know. And then around the time of Occupy, I got back involved in what I would call more, the phrase I always use is more big world activism. And that I have not left since 2011 or 2012. And there are stories to tell in there, but that's the thumbnail.
Mhm.
You know, Debbie, that reminds me, in high school, I was on the debate team, and I was also in something called extemporaneous speaking, where you would draw 3 topics, you pick one, and then you have to make an argument for, I don't know, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. I forget the amount of time. And when I was at the state competition, my choice of question was who was responsible for Watergate. So that's just an explanation of how I spent like the early years of my life dealing with policy, right? And dealing with issues, and not out on the ground saying, hi, vote for this or protest that.
It's interesting to me in part because I come from a family with a long history of activism, going back into the Revolutionary War. And my great-grandmother was a suffragist while her husband was in Congress.
Okay.
So there's a whole bunch of things about actually going out there and doing something, that comes from a family background of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm fortunate enough to have the privilege of knowing about their activism, because there are a great many people out there whose families have been activists for a long time who have no idea.
So I feel compelled to mention here that Tom's grandfather is the person who saved the unbelievably beautiful Muir Woods Redwood Park north of San Francisco for the world.
A great-grandfather and great-grandmother together.
When I said grandfather, I suddenly wasn't sure, but
and they're the couple I mentioned.
If you've never been to Muir Woods or even seen pictures of it, that's Tom's family activism at work.
They're the couple I mentioned where she was the suffragist and he was the representative.
Yeah.
So, but they clearly worked together,
Mm-hmm.
as well as working separately on various things. And that's an interesting and important thing about activism. It's really hard to do alone. How much have other people been a major focus of getting you continuing to be active? Deb, you were talking about Laurie Toby Edison and her photography. I know working on the gay pride parades with you and Dave was something that we all did, together.
I think I'm a people person. I'm an extrovert with a couple of caveats on that we won't get into because that's a different topic. But there are ways to be a solo activist, and some of them are very powerful. But for me, it's always been finding people I could work with, as well as causes I cared about.
I've done a lot of solo. Solo with support of husband, but solo as in not going out in a group of people. So I have door knocked for political campaigns, for Bernie Sanders, for Elizabeth Warren. I have spent my time in front of a computer with a little robocaller, calling people to help them this past election, help them get their ballots clean, their signatures clean, right? All of the people who had signatures that were contested in Pennsylvania, in Georgia. So I was just sitting here, me and a couple of my friends, we were all like, we shared the link with one another, but I was doing it by myself in a group with people that I didn't know. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. And I did a lot of things like postcarding.
Yes, postcarding too.
2024, which is basically solo work. I mean, you need someone who's guiding you, but they're not there.
Right. So I think it's important because a lot of times what we think of as activism is the very public protests. And there's so much other stuff that is involved in being involved in civic life that doesn't require you to be the person who's comfortable being in a crowd.
The protest events are, in a real way, the tip of the iceberg.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah, I
and
wanted
90% is underneath. Yeah.
I wanted to bring up, and maybe this isn't too early. When Trump was elected, an activist named Daniel Hunter, who writes at a blog called Waging Nonviolence, listed the his taxonomy of the 4 ways to fight back. And I find them very, very useful in this context. He says you can shore up existing institutions, you can protect the vulnerable, you can disrupt and disobey, and you can work to build new institutions. And I find that to be when I'm talking to people who don't know what they want to do, I find that to be very helpful because there are 4 different streams. I'm seeing Liam being very, very active in the chat about, what people should be doing. And we all have to do the things that suit our personality. You have to push yourself. You have to get out of your comfort zone, but in a direction that is right for you.
Yes. Otherwise, you get burnout.
Well, otherwise you don't do it. You don't even get burnout. You just don't do it. If you convince yourself that you should be going to protests and you hate being in crowds, what happens is you sit at home and get angry at yourself for not being at the protest, and that does nothing for no one.
One of the things that I really appreciate about the activism of the current moment in time is the fact that there's so many events that are local. And so I don't have to go into Seattle where there's thousands of people, and I hate crowds that are big like that. I can go to Edmonds where we had, I don't remember, I think 3,000 people, but it didn't feel overwhelming, right? I can go to 99 and 196th and wave cardboard signs on the weekends, and there's a couple hundred people. So there are ways, there seem to be more ways for those of us who don't want to do the great big event to actually get out and disrupt a little bit.
Yeah, and not all disrupting is public. Tom,
That's true.
The very first thing Tom said when we went live was that the 2 of us are old friends of his. Kathy and I do not know each other, for whatever that's worth, or didn't until this morning. But I just want to note the age of all 3 of us on the screen is not representative of the age of activists in the time of Trump 2.0. And the younger people, many of whom I count as not just my friends, but my mentors, have an understanding of activism that is very deep and very wide. And I'm only sorry that the 3 of us are all roughly of a generation.
That's absolutely true. But I also want to keep reminding people that you don't have to stop being an activist.
No, and most of the demonstrations I've been to are noticeably but not completely gray. That I've been to in the last 110 days or whatever it is.
The last that I did, which was the second big one, because I was out of town on May 1st, was remarkable to me for the fact that next to me was an 8-year-old girl with her mom and dad and her 13-year-old sister. And to the other side of me were women who were older than me who had protested the Vietnam War. And
yes. And I must say that I was out last Saturday tabling, and one of my very favorite things was a girl who was maybe 8 or 9 with a sign that her mother told me she did entirely herself that said, "I don't like Trump's rules."
Yeah,
Yeah.
my 28-year-old neighbor who, like you, Debbie, I think of her a bit as a mentor as well as a friend, because she is such an activist and she's running for city council. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm in her kitchen cabinet.
Yay.
Well, that's because you're in her kitchen.
That too.
Yeah, it is really important for us to keep making sure that younger people get on. I unfortunately know more older people that I can ask to come on.
I didn't mean that as a,
No.
I don't, you don't need to get defensive. I just wanted to note it.
I'm acknowledging your noting rather than getting defensive. I think.
Okay.
You know, I'm saying I love having people of all ages on this, and we've definitely had some younger people on occasionally. And as Liam says, the younger generation is what will save us. You know,
I said that to a parent once at a party, not too like 3 years ago, and that parent said to me, it's really unfair to put it on them. We made this mess. We should be helping clean it up.
Helping, absolutely. I don't think we should put it on them. I think that we should encourage them.
I agreed.
You know,
I was just quoting that because it struck me when someone said it.
Yeah, no, but it's an important perspective to remember.
Yeah.
We have one of the things that being older gives us is more perspectives.
Yes.
And they're not necessarily following our lead, as Bob would say, has just said, but we all have to be where we are now. And
hopefully they're learning from our mistakes.
Oh, I certainly hope so. We all do have to. Yeah, it's much easier to learn from one's own mistakes than other people's.
That's true, but at the risk of going,
Yeah.
the risk of going way off topic, we're not in a culture that values reflection. So in order to learn from one's mistakes, one has to be reflective. And that's not something that this culture tends to value.
But that relates directly to activism.
Yes.
Because you don't become an activist without reflecting. I don't think.
I think that's accurate.
And in that way, we are somewhat revolutionary by continuing to be active. As long as we're still doing stuff and trying to change things, we are in a quiet way being revolutionary. Yes, we do need to stand with our younger friends.
Absolutely.
And we need to encourage them and help them get into positions where they're leading. We need not to lead all the time, but we need
we need to step aside in some places.
Yeah.
Not we as in the three of us, we as in the collective we.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that every one of us here, the three of us, have encouraged younger people at various times and have helped them, do more. And I think that that's one of the things I like about being an activist is watching other people get it, particularly younger people, and start saying, I can do something. It may not be effective this time, but eventually something that we do will have an effect. Going back to the Vietnam War, none of the individual protests really did very much, but the collective act of continuing to protest did more.
And to piggyback on Bob's comment about Rachel Maddow on Colbert, that was one of the points that she made, is that right now when her team is monitoring all of the protests that are going on, and they're going on in every state every day, there's something happening, and they're like you said earlier, Tom, assuming they don't completely break the electoral policy, then, or that was Bob again,
That was
whatever.
Bob, yeah.
That was Bob. then 2026 should be a rout.
Mm-hmm.
I hope everybody saw the results of the Texas local elections last week.
I didn't.
I didn't.
They were phenomenal. Texas had a bunch of city council and school board elections, and not one right-winger won, even in the reddest counties in Texas.
Oh my goodness.
And this is 20, 30, 40 elections. This is not
Mm-hmm.
4. Places where nobody who wanted more conservative school boards won. It's a very, I can find the link and put it in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
Lone Star Left is the people whose link I have.
Yeah, on the JoCo cruise, I was talking with a woman who had been an activist in Florida, and she was speaking and commented that last year, 22 out of 23 legislative acts that were designed to get people under control, got defeated by them. Anti-gay,
Yeah.
anti-trans, all of that. Yeah, but they managed to stop 22 out of 23 of them. And as I want to bring up one of the things Charles Smart said in the chat, which is in 72, we thought we had the dragon slayed. We didn't burn the Hydra's cave.
Sherilyn Eiffel says we wanted to be in a time of reaping and we're in a time of harvest. And I think that's useful.
Mm-hmm.
One of my friends from college runs basically the equivalent of Emily's List in the state of Georgia for the state legislature. So getting women elected to the legislature, not getting women elected to Congress.
Mm-hmm.
And they're preparing for a district jungle election for a district for somebody who was just appointed by Trump to something. I don't remember the details, but they have one Democrat that's running against something like 9 Republicans and are hoping to replicate Texas and all of the other states where the special elections have gone Democratic.
Just to pick up something else from the chat, Liam is talking about speaking truth to power.
Mm-hmm.
And I certainly support that. But at the same time, it's also a time when we have to speak truth to the powerless.
Mm-hmm.
Elaborate.
Frightened immigrants, terrified trans kids, people who voted for Trump because they believe he was on their side, right? Arlie Hochschild's new book has a quotation where a guy says, "Oh, I knew he was lying when he said he would bring back coal, but I feel like he sees me." The Republicans have done a much, much better job of sowing fear and dissension and telling people that they're helpless and hopeless. With that, if you don't have Donald Trump with you, there is nothing you can do. And I never really thought about the phrase "speak truth to the powerless" until today. But I think there's something in it, along with speaking truth to power.
Well, there's also speaking support to the powerless. The true ways in which we can support them, even if it's just in little things.
Oh yeah, and let them lead. Talk about stepping aside for the young. Step aside for the people who know how to solve the problems.
Mm-hmm. Often the powerless know more about the problem, and rather than stepping aside, stepping under to help.
So that goes back to one of Debbie's 4. I can't remember the one that would be supporting people that are
vulnerable people.
Yeah,
protecting vulnerable people.
Mm-hmm. And there was a certain amount of that in the Vietnam War protests. Deb, I know that you were helpful in helping people get across the border to Canada.
No, but I was helpful in helping people get out of the draft.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody's quote. Bob is quoting from the link I put in the chat. about the Texas elections. That's what's going
Yeah.
on over there.
Yeah, that's what I was figuring it was. So how do we best help support the people who are coming up? What's the best thing to do?
Well, one is listen.
Mhm.
Excuse me. So I listen to Izzy and try not to dampen her enthusiasm, even when there's another part of my mind going, that's not practical. Those words don't come out of my mouth, right? I just censor myself and listen and support. And if she wants to try to do something, okay, how can I help you? And I will probably use Izzy a lot because she's my neighbor and she's my 28-year-old voice of conscience. And I don't want her to have to do everything by herself.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes, that should be hope takes a strategy, a plan, and a goal.
Hope also takes the right language. So hearing Debbie talk about how the Republicans have done such a good job, I keep going back to George Lakoff and Don't Think of an Elephant.
Mm-hmm.
Tom took a class from George Lakoff.
Did you?
He was an old acquaintance of mine too. Anyway, he stopped me and dragged me into a coffee shop to sit and chat with a group of people at one point.
So, but his critique of the Democratic Party is still to this day accurate.
Yes.
The language being chosen is too focused for people like me who live in our heads, right?
Better even than Lakoff, because she's younger and more in touch, is Anat Shenker-Osorio, who is just amazing. And she's a language and messaging guru that who speaks 4 languages, by the way, which is, I think, one of the things that makes her so powerful. And I cannot urge people enough to follow her and read her and check her out. But to Tom's question about supporting young people, a whole lot of it's what Kathy just said about listening, and it's also believing that they know things we don't know. Mm-hmm. Right. Believing, Kathy, that voice in your head that says that's not practical. I have that voice too, but I've learned to distrust it. Mm-hmm. And I think you have too. But just not thinking you know it all.
Yeah.
Which is something that is hard for some gray hairs to acknowledge.
There are days when it's hard for me. And I just one other thing to pick up a different thread very quickly. Hope, you were talking about the things hope is. The most important thing I think hope is that hope is a muscle. And that's Rebecca Solnit, it's Krista Tippett. I know I'm doing a lot of quoting because I do a lot of reading on these topics. Hope is a muscle. If you don't exercise it, it goes away.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and as Steve Barnes commented, in order for any muscle to grow, it needs 3 things. It needs nutrition, it needs stress, and it needs rest. So if you're wanting to exercise a muscle, make sure you take some time to support it in the other ways. And make sure that your hope, you don't try and make your hope be always huge.
Yeah, and one of the 2 things that strike me as most different between activism now and activism in the 60s and 70s are the focus on self-care and the focus on joy. Mm-hmm. We didn't talk about either of those things when I was a young activist. And now you cannot read anything about activism that don't bring both of them up. And I think it's really important. And I just want to uplift Cheryl's quote in the chat also. Everyone knows something you don't, no matter the age.
Mhm.
Truth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've learned that there are so many different types of intelligence
Mhm.
that everybody is smarter than I am in something. You know,
Yes.
we classify intelligence as if it's a single thing, but it never is. And the same is true, just as is true with activism. We need to be appreciative of the other ways people can be active and support them to be themselves
Mhm.
in what they're doing, which is one of the things that Deb brought up that I think it's really important to get back to, is do the things that make you want to keep doing stuff. And
One of
then I try to do the things that make me want to keep doing stuff. And if I see you doing something that is not what I want, I can say, great, I'm glad you're doing that.
Exactly. Like I have a friend who posts 3 things every day on Facebook, and they can be traditional activist stuff, one of those things, or they may be something very non-traditional. And she set a goal for herself to have 3 positive things that people can think about or do, not necessarily to change the world, but things that you can do to make yourself feel that you have some agency. And she's been doing this, I think, since January 20th. And I go read her to get my own little lift for the day, because one of the things that I found is I have writer's block for the first time in my long career of writing. And the first Trump administration, I probably wrote something every day. And this time around, I have maybe written 6 columns, because I have writer's block. And so I'm doing other things rather than writing for the moderate voice, and then feeling guilty because I'm not writing for the moderate voice.
It's a hard time to be a moderate.
Mhm.
Well, and I'm not a moderate. I'm just not as progressive as some of my progressive friends.
That means you're a moderate.
Well,
You know,
Joe started the moderate voice as a way to share views from all parts of the spectrum a long time ago, when that was actually something that you wanted to do. But today it's a progressive publication. Still has the name, but
Interesting.
yeah, you don't change a brand,
yeah.
you know. Yeah.
I just want. I seem to be resource girl today, but Jessica Craven, who is basically an activist leader who publishes a newsletter every day with things you can do.
Yes.
Every Sunday publishes a column she calls Extra Extra, which is all good news. It's the week's good news in one place. And I cannot tell you how regenerative it is. And I read it the minute it comes out. I go, okay, fine. I don't care what I'm doing. I'm going to do this.
So let me add to the resources. We have an organization in the state called Fix Democracy First, which focuses on campaign finance reform, among other things. And I maintain their website. So once a week, we have some sort of discussion. So it used to be an actual happy hour, and now it's a happy hour on Zoom. But at the end of it, we share links. And so every Thursday that we've had a happy hour, I post the summary of that happy hour, which includes a whole list of like news items if you've not been following the news, and you can pick up stuff about local, state news, not just all federal news. And we have a list of activist things that you can do, events that are coming up, and it's a really good resource. And then we also have a good news section.
Nice.
Yeah.
I want to go back to one of the things that Deb said there, which is the question of agency and of feeling that we have agency. I think that's a very important thing for activists to maintain, that if we only look at what isn't working, we end up losing all our drive to keep going. You know, agency is necessary to keep us moving forward.
Yeah, it was Kathy who brought up agency. Because I was so glad to hear the word come into the conversation. But it actually relates to something that I was wanting to say, which just flew instantly out of. Oh, I know. I wanted to bring it back to science fiction. And the reason I wanted to bring it back to science fiction is that somebody early in the chat said one of the things you need is a vision. And I personally don't think that just trying to tear something down is sufficient. And now it's so hard not to just focus on tearing things down. But one of the things that science fiction gives us is ways to think about what we are building in the long run. And I think that, the work that Bob and B Cubed and so many others do is really, really foundational to this work.
Yeah, this relates to what Cheryl Alexander just put in the chat. How do we help people lose their fear in order to bring them hope?
I think it goes the other way. I think you bring them hope, and that helps lose their fear.
Yeah.
But we're being very us and them, right? It's very, I am here with hope, and I can give it to you because I have it. And it's not like that. It's much more interactive and slow and patient and learning from each other.
This is related to agency, clearly.
Yes.
If we help people have agency to do things and have agency ourselves and pay attention to what we've done that has had a positive effect, this helps bring hope.
Yes.
The fact that something has worked means not everything we're doing is futile.
Well, I'm thinking of family, because if y'all haven't picked it up, I'm from the South. I'm from deep South Georgia. And one of the things that's difficult for me is talking to family members when I go home, because I have people who are of faith, but who support Trump, and I can't deal with that dissonance in my own head. So when I think about them or the people who are supporting Trump, why are they supporting Trump? What is the thing in the past that they think times were better and we're going to somehow be able to resurrect that? Is it jobs? Is it nuclear family? I mean, like what is the thing that they want that the fear is able to capture? Does that make sense?
Yes.
And I do not pretend to understand how you reach this, because I can't with some of my family.
I hear many people say they can't talk to their family about these things. I don't have any family on the other side of that line, for which I am grateful.
I'm lucky enough not to have family with that problem that I know, but I'm sure that there are some people in the extended Kent family that are on the other side.
And in most cases, these are families that were authoritarian in the lack-off sense. Father was in the service, military. You have all of that, and then you have the southernness on top of all of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. As Liam says, fear is easy, hope is not.
That's for darn sure.
Hope is a muscle and fear is not.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that fear is a muscle too. If we keep feeding it and keep exercising it, it gets stronger and stronger. And the Republicans have done a very good job of that.
Yes, they have.
I think it's different, but I would have to think about how to tease out the difference.
Mm-hmm.
I can't do it on the fly.
Well, it's all a metaphor anyway, so it's
Fair.
you know, there will be differences. Metaphors are always incomplete. You know, they're a way to help us think.
Yeah, Liam, fear feeds on the lizard brain. That's true.
Well, fear supports the lizard brain, you know, rather than feeding on it. I tend to think of feeding on consumes and gets rid of.
Oh, okay. Yes.
No, that's the way my metaphor works on that.
They're simpatico.
Yes, they're related. Yes.
Cheryl has a good question.
Yeah, why are the traditional nuclear family and gender roles so important? In part because we make them important, but they're easy to connect to.
People are afraid of change.
Yes.
People are afraid of change. Most people are afraid. I think everyone is afraid of change, but it's a spectrum from being a little afraid of change to being pathologically afraid of change.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think that the world we want, the world I want, which I think is the world probably most people in this conversation want, is a world which cannot coexist with the nuclear family and gender roles as they are currently conceived. So people who care about those things have reasons to be afraid.
I would disagree with that. I think that they can coexist, but only to the extent that it's recognized that those roles are one part of reality, rather than being the entire reality.
But that's
you know, the nuclear family isn't going to go away.
Same thing. This is the same thing as thinking that gay marriage is a threat to heterosexual marriage.
Yeah.
Or that polyamory is a threat to monogamy.
Yeah.
Right. But that is how most people react when they see something new next to something, is they think they don't want me to have my thing.
But this is why people who know people who are gay are much more in favor of gay rights than people who don't know the people they know are gay. Right? It's a question of making an example for them of, hey, you think I'm okay? I'm this person that you're so afraid of.
And this goes back to hardwiring, right? To the unknown being a danger. So if we go like way back, it's like maybe this is lizard brain. I don't know, but there was a time when the unknown was dangerous, or had a patina of danger.
Yeah,
and that feeling is one that gets extolled in Republican rhetoric. And so it becomes us versus them, in a sense that that they can't coexist. So I agree with Tom that yes, they can coexist, but I agree with Debbie that they can't coexist as long as the people think that theirs is the only way to live.
And I would certainly agree with that too.
And I would also say the unknown is still dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what fear of climate change is fear of the unknown to a very significant extent. The unknown is always dangerous. The question in my mind is how do you build resilience to fear?
Mm-hmm.
how do you build a willingness to face fear and go forward afraid?
Mhm. Well, I've always been fond of, I believe it was Will Rogers who said, it's not what you don't know that'll get you, it's what you do know that ain't so.
Yep, yep. And also, Liam says all they have is fear. And I think that, an internal ecosystem that is completely fear-based is so
Mhm.
self-destructive.
Yes.
It absolutely is. And I have found in trying to help people who are trapped in fear in a specific situation, one of the things that I'm generally good at is helping defuse situations. When somebody's really reactive at trying to be upset and is just incredibly upset, part of what I do is try to make sure that the person feels heard first. And fear is often fear that you don't know what I'm feeling.
Or you won't appreciate it.
You
Yeah.
don't see me.
Yeah. You
Yeah.
don't see me. And if I can start by helping somebody feel seen, then we can actually have a conversation. And in the conversation, we may continue to disagree, but at least they're not afraid of me.
And this is very resource intensive and very one-on-one.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
The
But it starts at one-on-one.
yeah.
And before the podcast started, we were chatting a little bit about Kathy has done more door knocking than I have, which isn't hard. I haven't done much. And I think Kathy has done a good deal. But I was talking about a relatively new concept called deep canvassing, in which people go door knocking with the intention of having longish conversations in which the door knocker is vulnerable about why they are doing the work. And it's time consuming and it's slow, and the numbers on it are astonishing.
Yeah.
There's a really good essay in The Persuaders by Anand Giridharadas about how deep canvassing works. There's also a really good essay on Anat Shankar Osorio in that book. The Persuaders is a fine choice if you want to read some of these things about this.
Well, I do.
Yeah, yeah.
And not because I'm going to do deep canvassing to run for
No, it's understanding how it works. That's of interest to me.
Yeah.
Liam has said something that I completely disagree with in the chat, which is Republicans tell fairy tales, Democrats tell the truth more or less. I think both sides tell fairy tales equally.
I don't think equally.
Well, I think that both sides do tell fairy tales.
I would say Republicans have agreed on a fairy tale.
Mm-hmm.
Republicans have a unified fairy tale. Democrats have a big, complicated mix of fairy tales and truth and nuance that is much harder to wrap your mind around.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's a bigger coalition.
It's a bigger coalition and it's more diverse, and I don't necessarily mean skin color or age, but just diverse in what matters.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm very glad, Carol, that we have helped feed your hope for the future, because that's what I wanted this to do. That is why I want us to bring activism out in the open, to bring people who are activists forward so that people can say, hey, they're just people. That means maybe I could do this too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, apparently there are a lot of first-time demonstrators out on the streets. I haven't actually talked to anybody, but I've read accounts of people who are going a lot and are saying they talk to a lot of first-time demonstrators. That's another thing that helps me feed my hope.
So when I was in Edmonds for the big rally day, there were a lot of people there. That it was the first time that they had ever gone to a rally. And one of the reasons, of course, that people came was because Rick Steves was the speaker. And what none of us understood until that day is that he had just flown in from Budapest the day before. And he wrote his remarks while he was on the plane flying in from Budapest. This thing was put together in like 3 days, and had like 3,000 people. But most, I can't say most, lots and lots of those people were first timers based on the conversations my friend and I had with people around us. And again, like I said, when I was there at 99 and 196th in Linwood, that family, it was first time for them and first time for that 8-year-old child to be out and waving a sign.
Rick Steves, the travel guy?
Yeah.
Rick Steves, the travel guy.
Yeah.
He lives in Edmonds.
How cool is that? And that's just such an interesting tactic, is to get somebody, this is a phrase I just picked up, the Republicans are very good at getting into red coded spaces that are not overtly political. And travel is actually a blue coded space that is not overtly political. So having somebody like Steves, who is a celebrity, but who isn't a politician, would be a really interesting way to think about putting together a rally or a protest or an event.
Right. It was two women decided that they needed one in Edmonds. And like, I'm serious. I put it together in like 3 days.
That's great.
Yeah.
And of course, Rick has the social media presence
Sure.
to advertise it. And what Izzy and I were thinking about doing, and one of my friends who lives in Edmonds, is we were going to go up to Linwood to the convention center, to that corner, because that's where everything was going to go here in the region. And then suddenly there was a thing in Edmonds, and we're like, we're going to a rally instead. Yes.
Cool.
Yeah. Well, Rick Steves has been quite a bit of an activist in general.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
But
Those of us who are local to him hear about it.
sure.
Right.
Yeah. He's in his own way like Penzi Spices.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Just not with a national audience.
Gotcha.
Somehow. Yeah. I
Well,
forgot how we got here, Tom. I forgot how we got to Rick Steves.
Because he was speaking at a
New people at their first time at
first time
rallies for their first time.
Yeah.
First time rallies.
And
Put an English sentence together. Really, I can.
all of us are people who went to a rally for the first time at some point.
At some point.
And it's since the 60s certainly, and well before, there have been rallies, and they've always had new people.
The suffragists had rallies.
Exactly. That's and the anti-communists had rallies, and the communists had rallies. So it's on both sides. But there were an awful lot of rallies against McCarthy. And
some little movie clips that are still available on YouTube.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We all come from a history, and it's important to remember the history, but it's important not to think that the history is what we're repeating.
Well, that's why it's so great to have Kathy here, who comes from a deep South history and is here, right? Where the story is everybody from the deep South is conservative and racist and blah and blah and blah. And there's so much human variation. People change in such interesting ways.
But I did leave.
I don't know if we have time, but I'd love to hear your story of getting from whether you grew up with these politics or whether you found them and when you found them.
Well, in retrospect, I've decided that my mother was far more radical than I realized when I was a child. My mother was the primary breadwinner in our home. And we had two newspapers. We had the Atlanta Constitution and we had the Albany Herald. So, and we watched the news on television. so I came from a family where being informed was an important thing, but politics was like religion. It was something that you didn't talk about. And so occasionally I would hear my parents talking in the kitchen because I'm an only child, but there was never a political discussion when I was present in the room. It just was verboten. So I moved north, and then like a king in checkers, I came out here. In 1989, I jumped the country and came from Pennsylvania to the state of Washington, and found a place where I felt at home and have stayed. And so this area helped, I think, help me open up to things that I had already been important to me. The whole issue of power was always important to me. I worked for cooperatives where dairy farmers work together in order to have countervailing power against the people who buy their milk. So I've been Don Quixote tilting at power windmills since I was in high school.
Yeah. I also want to bring up a book that Bob published called Southern Truths, which is an awful lot about the progressive side of the South.
And it's there.
It is there. Absolutely.
Oh, it's always been there.
Yeah. But we all forget it. We often forget it.
Well, it doesn't make the headlines so much.
Yeah. It's not the usual story.
Yes.
But it's a really good anthology, and there are some lovely pieces in it. Do you have a copy of Southern Truths to hold up, Bob, or are you? I could go and grab one, but it would take me away from here for a moment.
There it is.
Yes.
And
Karen was one of the editors.
Notice there's a name there that.
Yes.
Tom was just saying Karen was one of the editors.
Karen Anderson.
Yes.
Karen Anderson is one of our core members. Okay, I've got an echo here. I'm sorry. Just a second while I fix that.
At least it's not a long delay echo. It's very, very, it just makes you sound like you're in a cathedral. He's speaking ex cathedra now that we have another pope.
A very exciting pope, by the way.
Yes.
Yeah, there's all sorts of interesting things about him.
Talk about being an activist.
Yeah.
This is an activist pope.
Mm-hmm.
At least based on his history.
As well.
Laura Loomer says he's a Marxist.
Wow. As if we trust your judgment.
Yeah.
Can you hear me better now? No?
Not much.
Oh, wait a second.
Anyway, I would like both Deb and Kathy to take a second or two to sum up what they felt about the conversation and how things have gone in talking about this. Kathy, would you like to go first?
Not really, but I will. Well, for me, this has just been fascinating. I was a little nervous, as you know, about coming on because I felt like I did not have this long history of activism. But you and Karen pointed out to me that, well, yes, I did. It's just I don't have the traditional kind of activism. Since the only thing that me in the Vietnam War was I was worried that my high school friends might get drafted. But beyond that, the South was, I guess, in favor of the Vietnam War. I don't remember any protests. So I really appreciate the fact that Debbie brought up the 4 points of ways of thinking about approaching activism and the things that we can do that are beyond showing up at a big rally. I think that may be the most important thing. The most important takeaway from here is that there's a place for introverts in activism?
I guess I would say that any conversation that brings people together to talk about hope and agency and the future and the big tent is going to be important to me. And I think this did all of those things.
Well, I'm very, very glad to have had both of you here. And I think that we've had a really good conversation. The people in the chat have all seemed to feel that it's helped them. I haven't seen anybody feeling totally depressed about it. Thank you all.
Well, the depressed people are probably not chatting.
Yeah.
Hey,
Yeah.
I'm just saying, I am not sure why I'm getting an echo, and it's driving me crazy because it means I can't hardly talk. But the fundamentals of it are this. You guys are talking about the stuff that's important here. And Tom mentioned one of our books that we have out called Southern Truths. I posted up a link earlier to one called the Protest Diaries that we published. I'm posting a little appearance of how the book appears on Amazon because this book came about when we watched the Portland protests, the Seattle protests for the Black Lives Matter movement, because I've noticed a shift. When we were out doing protests for Black Lives Matter, I guarantee you there were at least 4 or 5 times during the protest where we had trucks waving Trump flags, driving through, crowding the sidewalks, trying to intimidate people, just making life miserable. Counter protesters galore. This time around, we have seen a huge number of people showing up to protest, but I have not seen a single counter protester. I have not had a single truck ride by with 2 or 3 Trump flags in the back, flipping us the finger and trying to shout us down. America is not liking what's going on in Washington, D.C., and the fact that they don't means it's our opportunity to give them something to like better. So while you're out there doing your protest and being active, don't just be anti-Trump. Don't just be anti-Musk. Be for something. What matters? I mean, right now we are seeing America's role as a leader in health, research, and like just totally destroyed. It's sad. So I just would urge you guys to remember that as we're out here doing what we're doing, don't just be against stuff. Be for something. And Tom, what you going to tell us about Karen's new book?
I'll mention it one more time. Patty 209 is a collection of 15 tales of near future dystopias. It includes the famous Yoga for Protesters and all sorts of wonderful things. I'm prejudiced. I like her work. But the real difficult thing about this book is that she writes about near future dystopias that then come true. She wrote about somebody assassinating a healthcare CEO 4 years before that happened. And it's available through Amazon, but also through independent bookstores. She's done it through Ingram Spark. Barnes and Noble can get it for you. It's very available. You can also get it electronically. both on Apple and on the dreaded Amazon. So it's
can I throw another echoey endorsement here? Karen Anderson, she is while she might be a Yaley, we can forgive her for that. But the she's good. She is just one of the best writers in her genre that I'm aware of. I mean, and you're talking about a guy. I mean, I have proudly published Resnick, Elizabeth N. Scarborough, all sorts of
Adam Troy
very
Castro.
well-known writers. But of all of them, Karen is the one. When I see a story from Karen, I know I have one less slot to fill in a book. She's just that good. So if you see her name on a story, her name on a book, get it. She is you know, just I guess brilliant. And I'm not just saying that because she's brilliant. She earns it. So that said, Tom, do you want to get anything to close this out?
I think we just did that with giving each of our guests a chance to say something. I want to thank you all for being here, and I want to thank everyone who listened. And I hope that you go out and, as John Lewis said, get in good trouble.
Thanks to Tom for bringing this together.
Yes, thanks, Tom.
Oh,
You're
and
very
guys,
welcome.
I want you back at some point because you know what? Protesting ain't over. I'm right now trying to figure out how to take the flag that lay on my father's coffin with me to Washington so that I can wave that in front of a tank where that stupid bastard of a president we have, and I'll say that freely, wants to have a $90 million parade for his birthday and calling it just peanuts while he's out there killing Head Start, killing our health institutions, cutting Medicaid, and try and figure out a way to justify accepting a $400 million luxury jet from Qatar for his own purposes and uses, and is out there violating the emollients clause every time he starts up a new Bitcoin, which is
Hey, Bob, before something, not just against things.
Before something, not just against.
Well, I will be. I will be for a president who puts America first. I'll be for the fact that we use our money, our collective government money that we all pay taxes for, to serve the people, not to make the wealthier wealthy. I'm for us all paying our fair share. I'm for a progressive taxing system, not a regressive tax system. I'm for things that keep children vaccinated and out of hospitals and cemeteries. But anyway, you could get me on a rant here, and I will go on to it for a long time. But now I'm just going to say, Kathy, Debbie, you guys have been wonderful. Tom, thanks for bringing them. And I'm going to go away while I still have people willing to listen to me.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.